Hi, my name is Jessica Woods, and I'm a Hocking College nursing student, and I'm going to be giving you a presentation today about hypertension or high blood pressure. And hypertension is a condition in which the force of blood against your arteries is high, and this can cause health conditions such as heart disease. It is measured by the amount of blood your heart pumps out and the force or resistance against the blood flow, and that determines your blood pressure. The more blood your heart pumps out and the narrower your arteries are, gives you a higher blood pressure reading. About 33% of Americans have high blood pressure, and this is the leading risk factor for the leading cause of death in the United States. Also, after the age of 40, if your blood pressure increases by 10 millimeters of mercury, you have an increased risk for stroke by 10%, an increased risk for heart attack by 11%, and a 16% increase for morbidity or death. And these percents are higher in younger adults. How many of you take your blood pressure normally or on a regular basis? If you are an average American adult, you probably don't take your blood pressure on a regular basis. And I'm going to suggest that this is something that we all start doing because hypertension is something that we call the silent killer, and meaning that there are no signs and symptoms leading up to developing high blood pressure. So by the time we realize we have it, it's either too late or we've had devastating effects such as a stroke, a heart attack, we've developed coronary artery disease, or even peripheral vascular disease affecting blood vessels in your arms and legs. So as you can see, it's a very devastating disease that can be prevented. And I'm going to give you ways such as checking your blood pressure daily or once a month on a regular basis, and making a few healthy lifestyle changes, and these can all lead to preventing developing hypertension. There are some risks. Let's talk about how we measure blood pressure first. We use a blood pressure cuff, and it goes on your upper arm, and we can use a stethoscope here in the middle part of your elbow, and we're listening for two sounds, and the first sound is called your systolic blood pressure, and that measures when your heart is contracting. And the second sound is called your diastolic blood pressure, and that measures when your heart's relaxing or refilling back up with blood. These two measurements come out in two numbers written in a fraction, and that gives you your blood pressure. A normal blood pressure is 120/80 millimeters of mercury, and then there's also stages of hypertension. So if you have prehypertension, your systolic may be anywhere from 120 to 129, and your diastolic would read anywhere from 80 to 89. This is where we'd like to catch it. Stage 1 hypertension could be anywhere from 130 to 139 for systolic and 80 to 89 for diastolic. And then stage 2 hypertension, where we don't want to get to, would be above 160 for systolic and above 100 for diastolic. And that would be stage 2 hypertension. There are risk factors for hypertension. We have non-modifiable risk factors, which are things that we cannot change, and modifiable risk factors, which is things that we can control or change within our lifestyle. So some non-modifiable risk factors would be our age. As we get older, our arteries tend to harden and get what we call arteriosclerosis, and they can expand and dilate as well. So that leads us to have more pressure and increase our workload on our heart. Gender. Males tend to develop hypertension more than females do. Sorry, gentlemen. Also, race. African Americans tend to have a higher risk for hypertension, and family history. We can't get away from our genetics, so if your family has a history of hypertension, you might have a higher risk of developing hypertension as well. Some modifiable risk factors, which is what we're going to focus on, would be obesity, sedentary lifestyle, alcohol, tobacco, stress, and increased sodium in your diet. And these are all risk factors that contribute to hypertension, but are risk factors that we may modify or control in our life. So let's talk about some ways we can modify and control those. First one I mentioned was taking your blood pressure on a regular basis. So if you could take your blood pressure at least once a month and keep it in a journal, that way you can monitor if you're getting elevated blood pressure and catch it early so that you can see a doctor and get a plan of care to treat your hypertension. That's the first thing. Blood pressure cuffs cost anywhere from $15 to $70, and they're very easy to use. Usually you strap them on your arm and you press a button and it reads out your answer or your blood pressure for you to record. Another thing that I mentioned is exercise. So we can decrease our risk for hypertension by starting to exercise. Recommended amount is 20 to 30 minutes, 5 days a week. And there's different ways we can get our exercise. If you want to spend money, you can join a gym. And I know we don't all like to spend money, but it might be good motivation to get you there so that you know you're not wasting your money every month. It'll motivate you to go to the gym. Also, group activity classes at the gym can be a motivator. If you want to go the free route, you can use the outdoors for hiking, walking, biking, running, or even little things that you can do throughout your day. If you don't have the time for 30 minutes at one time, you can park your car a little bit further at the grocery store so that you have to walk a little extra distance to get there and back. And you can take the stairs instead of the elevator. Those are just a few options. Also, eating healthier. We tend to eat a lot of fats, cholesterol, and sweets in our diet, and fats and cholesterol tend to build up something called plaque in your arteries, and that plaque is what we call atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is the leading risk factor for hypertension. Atherosclerosis builds up inside those arteries so that the artery narrows and the lumen gets really small. Kind of like if you had a garden hose and you were going to kink it off or make it smaller, the pressure would build up and you'd have a lot stronger force. That's like blood pressure. When those arteries narrow, the pressure builds up behind and you have high blood pressure or hypertension, and the workload of your heart is a lot harder. We can also limit our alcohol intake. You don't have to get rid of it completely, but the intake for men, or daily recommended amount, is 2 drinks a day, and for women is 1 drink a day. And you can choose some healthier options. Instead of beer or hard alcohol, you can drink red wine, and red wine is actually heart healthy. It's healthy for your heart to drink 1 4-ounce glass of wine a night. Another thing we talked about was obesity. So we need to maintain a healthy weight, and you can figure out your healthy weight. We determine that by what we call BMI, which is a body mass index, and that is measured using height and weight of the client, and there's a certain criteria or number that you need to be at, and if we can get ourselves in that range, that can decrease your risk for hypertension. Another thing we talked about was tobacco. That's a huge risk factor for hypertension because it constricts your blood vessels and it builds up plaque in your arteries. And local health departments as well as hospitals offer smoking cessation classes, as well as doctors can prescribe you medications that help curb your craving for tobacco. Another big risk factor is stress. We all have stress in our lives and a ton going on. So if we can find ways to manage it, such as decreasing your workload or prioritizing, or different activities such as music therapy, relaxation and deep breathing, getting a massage, yoga, meditation, those are some things that can help relieve stress or decrease stress. I talked about decreasing salt in your diet. Salt is a substance that retains water, and if we retain water, we have a bigger volume of blood, and our heart has to work harder to pump that big volume of blood through our body. So an average American takes in about 600 milligrams of salt, which is this whole container of salt. And we're recommended to only take in about 2,400 milligrams of salt, so, you know, a little less than half of this. So if we can decrease our salt intake, that'll be a huge help in decreasing or preventing developing hypertension. We talked about a healthier diet. There's a recommended diet called the DASH diet. It is used to treat hypertension. It focuses on portion sizes and getting the right nutrients and minerals in your diet. It talks about different serving sizes that you should get into a day. Whole grains, you should get about 6 to 8 servings of whole grains, which anything on the label that says whole wheat will be a product that you could choose. You can only have 2,300 milligrams of sodium, which we talked about earlier. Vegetables, you can have 4 to 5 servings, and a serving is about 1 cup of green leafy vegetables, or half a cup of raw or cooked vegetables, or a full cup of green leafy vegetables. Fruits are going to be 1 to 5 servings a day of one medium fruit. Dairy are going to be 2 to 3 servings, and you want to try to choose low-fat dairy products such as low-fat milk or low-fat cheese. You want to have 4 to 5 servings of nuts and legumes, less than 6 servings of lean meat or fish, and 2 to 3 servings of fats and oils. Like a tablespoon of mayonnaise would be a serving, or half a teaspoon of margarine, and less than 5 sweets per week, less than 5 servings of sweets per week. This is another option we need to get rid of. I was trying to show you an example of some fats and cholesterols, potato chips and salt. That would be the DASH diet. Now, these changes in risk factors or changing things in your lifestyle don't always work. So the other thing you can do is, if those don't work, the doctor can prescribe you medications to help with high blood pressure. Just going to mention a few of these medications. A classification is thiazides. Those are diuretics, and what they do is they decrease the amount of water that you retain and sodium. And that will decrease your blood volume, so the amount of blood your heart has to pump is less, and that reduces the workload of your heart. The other 4 medications are beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, calcium channel blockers, and vasodilators, and those all have different ways that they work, but in the end result, they keep your blood vessels from constricting, so you always have a round, narrow lumen for blood to go through, or they dilate your blood vessels, making them even bigger, so that reducing the workload of your heart. So those are some options that we can use if modifying your lifestyle does not work. As you can see, hypertension is a big deal, and it can lead to many devastating things. As mentioned, coronary artery disease, peripheral vascular disease, strokes, and heart attacks. And just by doing a few things, spending $15 to $70 to get a blood pressure cuff and checking it once a month, having a little bit of exercise, changing a few things in your diet to be more healthy, stop smoking, maybe decreasing your alcohol intake and stress, making those small modifications may really help you in the long run and in the future. And I think that's really important to have a long, healthy life. I thank you for your time, and any questions?